I am 101 years old, and I have outlived almost everyone I ever loved. My friends are gone. My husband is gone. Even my younger sister, who used to hold my hand when we crossed the road, she's gone too. And now, as I sit by this quiet window, watching the light fade a little earlier each evening, I have nothing left to hide from. Not from you, not from myself. Because when you reach this age, the truth becomes louder than your pride. And there is one truth, one painful, stubborn truth that has followed me through every decade of my life. It is not about money. It is not about success. It is not even about love. It is about something far simpler and far more devastating. And if you don't understand it, now you will. But by then, it may already be too late. So listen to me carefully, because this is the only thing I truly regret. I was not always like this, slow, quiet, careful with every step. Once, I was a girl who ran barefoot through dusty roads. I grew up in a small village where the mornings smelled like wet earth and firewood, and the evenings were filled with the sound of crickets and distant laughter. We did not have much. No electricity, no television, no phones buzzing in our pockets, but we had time. Endless, beautiful time. I remember sitting beside my mother while she cooked. The fire would crackle, and she would tell me stories about her childhood, stories I didn't always listen to, because I was always in a hurry. Even as a child, I was in a hurry to grow up. I wanted more freedom, more excitement, a bigger life beyond those narrow dirt roads. And I used to think time was something I had plenty of. I thought it would always be there, waiting for me. I was wrong. When I turned 18, I left home. I still remember that morning. My mother woke up before the sun. She made my favorite bread, the one she only made on special occasions. But that day, she didn't eat. She just watched me. There was something in her eyes, something I didn't understand back then. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was knowing, a quiet kind of knowing that only comes from living long enough to see how life really works. She held my face in her hands and said something I brushed off like it was nothing. She said, "Don't rush your life, my daughter. The days are long, but the years are short." I smiled. I nodded, but I didn't listen, because at 18, you think you are smarter than time itself. The city felt like a different world. Lights everywhere. Noise that never stopped. People who walked fast and talked faster. I loved it. I felt alive. And for the first time, I felt important. I found work quickly. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough. And that was all I cared about, because in my mind, I had a plan. Work hard, earn more, become someone. I told myself I would visit home soon. Next month, I said, but next month turned into next year, and next year turned into silence. Life moved quickly after that. I got married in my mid-20s. He was a kind man, quiet, gentle, the kind of man who didn't say much, but when he did, his words carried weight. We built a life together, a small apartment, a simple routine, a growing list of responsibilities. And then came the children, two beautiful souls who filled our home with laughter, chaos, and sleepless nights. Those were busy years, very busy. And I told myself something that many people still tell themselves today. I don't have time right now. No time to visit my parents. No time to sit and write letters. No time to just be. But I believed I would make time later. There's always a later in your 20s and 30s. You feel it in your bones, that life is long, that you can always catch up. You think love can wait. You think people will wait. One afternoon, I received a letter. It was from my father. His handwriting was weaker than I remembered. The words were simple. "Your mother misses you. Come if you can." That's all it said. No guilt, no pressure, just a quiet invitation. And I remember holding that letter in my hands, thinking I should go. But I didn't, because that week was busy. And the next week was even worse. And then I forgot. Yes, I forgot. That is how easily it happens. Not because you don't care, but because life convinces you that what matters most can be postponed. Months later, another letter came. This one was not from my father. It was from a neighbor. And before I even opened it, something inside me already knew. My hands were shaking. My heart felt heavy. The words inside were short. Your mother passed away peacefully. Peacefully. Such a gentle word for something that breaks you so deeply. I remember sitting on the floor, holding that letter, and feeling something inside me crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like something that could never be fixed again. I went back home for the funeral. The village looked smaller than I remembered. The roads, the house, even the sky felt different. Or maybe it was me who had changed. People came to greet me. They spoke softly, respectfully, but I could feel it. That unspoken question in their eyes. Why didn't you come sooner? I walked into the house, and everything smelled the same. The kitchen, the wooden table, the old chair where my mother used to sit. But she wasn't there. And that absence, it was louder than anything I had ever heard. My father looked older, much older. Grief does that to people. It ages them in ways time cannot explain. He didn't say much when he saw me. He just nodded. And that hurt more than anger ever could. Because silence carries disappointment in its purest form. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the same place where my mother used to tell me stories. And I remembered her words. Don't rush your life. The years are short. For the first time, I understood. But understanding came too late. That was the beginning of my regret. Not because I didn't love her, but because I treated time as if it was something I could control. As if I could pause it, delay it, come back to it whenever I wanted. But time doesn't wait. Not for your plans. Not for your convenience. Not even for your love. And here is the bitter truth, the one that may hurt you to hear. The world today is even worse than it was back then. You are busier than ever, more connected, yet more distant. You carry entire lives inside your phones, but forget the people sitting right beside you. You say, I'll call them later. I'll visit next month. I'll spend time when things settle down. But things never settle down. Life doesn't slow itself for you. You have to choose to slow down. And most people never do. Let me tell you something you may not want to accept. One day, the person you keep postponing will no longer be there. One day, there will be no later. And on that day, all the reasons you had will feel small. All the busyness, all the distractions, all the excuses, they will mean nothing. Because regret has a way of making everything else seem insignificant. I carried that regret for decades. Through raising my children, through growing older, through losing more people I loved. It never left me. It softened, perhaps, but it never disappeared. Because some things, once broken, cannot be undone. So if you are listening to me right now, if there is someone in your life you've been meaning to call, to visit, to sit with, don't wait. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Because love is not something you feel in your heart alone. It is something you give with your time. And time is the only thing you can never get back. If I could go back, if I could change just one thing, I would have gone home. I would have sat beside my mother, listened to her stories, held her hand a little longer. I would have chosen time over everything else. But I cannot go back. And one day, neither will you. So promise me something. When this video ends, don't just move on. Don't just scroll. Take a moment. Think of the person you've been postponing. And reach out. Because one day, you will either be grateful that you did or you will sit where I am sitting now, with a quiet room of fading light and a heart full of things you wish you had done. This is only the first of many lessons life has taught me. And if you are willing to listen, I will tell you more, because at 101 years old, the past is all I have left to give. And maybe, just maybe, it can save you from the same regret. When my mother died, I thought that was the deepest regret I would ever carry. I was wrong. Life has a way of teaching the same lesson again and again until you finally understand it. Sometimes gently, sometimes not so gently. Years passed after that day. I returned to the city, back to my routines, back to the life I had built so carefully. From the outside, everything looked stable. My children were growing. My husband was working hard, and I had become the kind of woman people respected, responsible, dependable, strong. But inside, there was a quiet shift. Something had changed in me after my mother's death. I became more aware of time, not enough to change my life completely, but enough to feel it slipping, like water through your fingers. You notice it, but you still can't hold it. My father started writing to me more often after that. Short letters, simple updates about the village, the weather, the neighbors, the old tree in our yard that had finally stopped bearing fruit. And sometimes he would write about my mother, not directly, just small things. I found her old scarf today. The kitchen feels empty without her. There was a loneliness in his words, but he never asked me to come, not once. And maybe that's what made it easier for me to keep delaying. I visited him, but not as often as I should have. Once a year, sometimes less. Always telling myself, next time I'll stay longer. But next time has a cruel way of becoming too late. One winter, I received another letter, but this time it wasn't written in his handwriting. It was from the same neighbor. And again, before I opened it, I knew my father had passed away in his sleep, quietly, alone. There is a different kind of pain when the second parent goes. It is heavier because now there is no one left who remembers you from the very beginning. No one who knows the child you used to be. No one who calls you by the name only they used. You become untethered, as if a part of your identity has been quietly erased. At his funeral, I stood there surrounded by familiar faces that now felt distant. And I realized something that still haunts me to this day. I did not know my father as well as I thought I did. I knew him as a figure, a presence, a role in my life. But I did not know his thoughts, his fears, his dreams, the things he never said out loud, because I never made the time to ask. That was my second regret, not losing him, but never truly knowing him. You see, we assume that love automatically means connection, but it doesn't. You can love someone deeply and still not know who they really are, because knowing someone takes time. It takes presence. It takes sitting down, asking questions, listening without rushing. And most people don't do that. Let me tell you about one moment that still lives in my mind as clearly as if it happened yesterday. It was during one of my visits. My father and I were sitting outside the house. The sun was setting just like it is now as I speak to you. He was quieter than usual, and after a long silence, he said something I didn't expect. He said, "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had stayed?" I laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know how to answer. I said something simple, something safe. "I don't know, Baba, but I'm happy with my life." He nodded, but there was something in his eyes, something I didn't understand at the time. Then he said, "I used to have dreams too, you know." That sentence, it should have opened a door. I should have asked him everything. What dreams? Why didn't you follow them? What did you want your life to be? But I didn't. I just smiled and changed the subject. That was the moment I lost the chance to truly know him, and I didn't even realize it. Years later, after he was gone, I would sit and think about that conversation over and over again, trying to fill in the blanks, trying to imagine the life he never spoke about. But imagination is a poor substitute for truth. And once someone is gone, their stories go with them. This is the second lesson I want you to understand. And it is just as important as the first. Do not wait until people are gone to become curious about them. We live in a world now where everyone is talking, posting, sharing, expressing, but very few people are truly listening. Even within families, conversations have become shallow. How was your day? Fine. What did you eat? This and that. And then everyone goes back to their screens, back to their distractions, back to their own separate worlds. But real connection, it doesn't happen in those surface level moments. It happens in the pauses, in the deeper questions, in the willingness to sit with someone without rushing away. Let me give you a bitter truth, one that many people will ignore. If you don't make the effort to truly know the people you love, you will lose them twice. Once when they leave this world, and once when you realize you never really knew them at all. After my father died, something in me began to wake up, a kind of awareness that I had been avoiding for years. I started looking at my own children differently, not just as my children, but as individuals, people with their own thoughts, their own fears, their own dreams. And I realized I was making the same mistake again. I was present, but not truly present. I was there, but not deeply connected. I knew their schedules, their responsibilities, their achievements, but I didn't always know what was happening inside their hearts. One evening, my daughter came to me. She must have been around 14 at the time. She stood in the doorway, hesitant, as if she wasn't sure whether she should speak. And I was busy. Of course I was. There was always something to do. Cooking, cleaning, preparing for the next day. I looked at her and said, "Yes, what is it?" She paused, then said, "Nothing. It's okay." And she walked away. That moment, it didn't seem important at the time. Just a small, ordinary interaction. But years later, it would come back to me, and I would realize that was a moment she needed me, and I wasn't really there. You see, regret doesn't always come from the big things. Sometimes it comes from the smallest moments you didn't pay attention to, the conversations you rushed, the questions you didn't ask, the times you chose distraction over presence. As my children grew older, they became more independent, more distant, not because they didn't love me, but because that is what life does. It pulls people in different directions. And slowly, the house that was once full of noise became quieter, room by room, year by year. One day, my son moved out, then my daughter, and suddenly it was just me and my husband, two people sitting in a home filled with echoes. We told ourselves this was normal. This is life, we said. Children grow up. They leave. They build their own lives. And that is true. But what we don't talk about is what gets left behind. The silence, the distance, the realization that time has moved faster than you expected. I started thinking more and more about my parents, about the life they lived after I left, about the quiet they must have felt. And for the first time, I truly understood them, not as my parents, but as people. And that understanding, it came with pain, because now I could see everything I had missed, everything I had taken for granted, everything I thought I could make up for later. So here is my warning to you, and I want you to hear this clearly. Do not assume that relationships will take care of themselves. They won't. Love is not enough. Time, attention, presence. These are the things that keep relationships alive. if you keep choosing convenience over connection, if you keep choosing distraction over presence, if you keep telling yourself, I'll do it later, you will wake up one day and realize later has run out. And when that day comes, you won't regret the money you didn't make. You won't regret the tasks you didn't complete. You will regret the moments you missed, the people you didn't truly see, the conversations you didn't have. I am 101 years old now, and when I look back at my life, the clearest memories are not of achievements, not of success, but of moments, small, quiet, ordinary moments, sitting beside my mother, hearing my father speak about his past, watching my children laugh without a care in the world. Those were the moments that mattered. And those were the moments I didn't fully appreciate when I had them. So before I leave you for now, I want to give you something simple, something you can do today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. Sit with someone you love, put your phone away, turn off the noise, and ask them a real question, not the kind you ask out of habit, but the kind that opens a door. Ask them about their past, their dreams, their fears, and then listen, really listen, because one day those answers will be all you have left. If you are willing to keep listening to me, there is more I need to tell you, because the regrets don't end here. And the next one, it may be the hardest of all to accept. There is a kind of regret that doesn't come from what you lost. It comes from who you became while you were busy surviving. And this one took me the longest to understand. By the time I reached my 40s, life had settled into something predictable, not easy, but familiar. My husband and I had built a rhythm. Wake up early, work, take care of responsibilities, sleep, repeat. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years. And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking myself a very important question. Am I happy? You see, when you are young, happiness feels urgent. You chase it. You look for it in people, places, achievements. But as you grow older, something changes. You become practical. You start focusing on stability, security, survival. And slowly, quietly, you begin to accept a life that is good enough. I told myself I was lucky. I had a stable home, a husband who didn't cause trouble, children who were growing into responsible adults. What more could I ask for? That's what I believed. That's what many people still believe. But there is a silent danger in that kind of thinking, because good enough can become a prison, a comfortable one, but a prison nonetheless. Let me tell you something I have never said out loud before. There were many years when I felt invisible, not unloved, not unwanted, just unseen. My husband was a good man, but he was not an expressive man. He didn't speak about feelings. He didn't ask deep questions. He showed love through responsibility, through providing, through being present. And for a long time, I convinced myself that was enough. But inside me, there was a part that longed for something more, a conversation that went deeper, a moment of true emotional connection, a feeling of being understood, not just needed. And instead of expressing that, instead of speaking honestly, I did what many people do. I stayed silent because silence feels safer. It avoids conflict. It avoids discomfort. It avoids the risk of being misunderstood. But silence also does something else. It builds distance. Years pass like this. Two people living side by side, sharing a life, but not fully sharing themselves. We talked about practical things, bills, children, plans, but we rarely talked about what was happening inside us. One evening, I remember it clearly. We were sitting together after dinner. The house was quiet, and for some reason, I felt a sudden urge to speak, to finally say what had been sitting in my heart for years. I turned to him and said, "Are you happy?" He looked at me, surprised, as if I had asked him something unusual. He paused, then said, "Yes, of course. Why wouldn't I be?" I nodded, but I didn't feel satisfied with that answer. So I asked again, "No, I mean truly happy." He smiled, slightly, the kind of smile people use when they don't want to go deeper. And he said, "This is life. Happiness comes and goes." And just like that, the moment passed. The door closed, and I let it close. That was my third regret. Not that he didn't understand me, but that I didn't give him the chance to. You see, we often blame others for not meeting our emotional needs. But we forget something important. People cannot read what we refuse to express. I spent years waiting for him to understand me without ever clearly telling him what I needed. And that is a quiet form of self-betrayal. Let me tell you the truth, the one that many people avoid. You cannot build a deep life with shallow communication. And this doesn't only apply to marriage. It applies to friendships, to family, to every relationship you care about. If you keep everything inside, if you avoid difficult conversations, if you choose comfort over honesty, you will slowly drift away from the people you love. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, until one day you look at each other and realize you don't really know each other anymore. In my case, it wasn't a dramatic ending. There was no big argument, no moment of collapse, just years of quiet distance. And then one day he got sick. It started small, a persistent cough, fatigue. We didn't think much of it at first, but then it got worse. Doctors, tests, hospital visits, and suddenly our routine life was replaced with something fragile, something uncertain. I spent months by his side, watching him weaken, watching the man who had always been steady become vulnerable. And in those moments, something inside me broke open. All the words I had held back for years, all the conversations we never had, they came rushing to the surface. I wanted to tell him everything, how I felt, what I needed, what I had been carrying inside for so long. But now, time was no longer on our side. There is a cruel irony in life. We wait until the moment feels right, until we feel ready, until circumstances are perfect, and then suddenly there is no time left. One night, I was sitting beside his bed. The room was quiet, machines humming softly, and I looked at him, really looked at him, not as my husband, but as a human being, a man who had lived his life the best way he knew how, a man who had his own struggles, his own fears, his own unspoken thoughts. And I realized something that changed me forever. He was just as human as I was, just as imperfect, just as uncertain. And for the first time, I spoke, not perfectly, not elegantly, but honestly. I told him I wished we had talked more, that I wished we had understood each other better, that I sometimes felt alone, even when we were together. He listened quietly, and after a long pause, he said something I will never forget. "I thought you were okay." That sentence, it shattered me, because I realized he wasn't ignoring me. He wasn't distant on purpose. He simply believed I was fine. And why wouldn't he? I never showed him otherwise. In that moment, all the years of silence became clear, not as his failure, but as ours. We spent the rest of that night talking, really talking. For the first time in decades, we spoke about everything we had never said, our fears, our regrets, our quiet disappointments. And in that conversation, we found something we had been missing for years, connection. But it came too late. He passed away a few weeks later, and I was left with a strange mixture of peace and regret. Peace because we finally spoke. Regret because we waited so long to do it. This is what I want you to understand. And I want you to feel this, not just hear it. Do not wait until the end to have the conversations that matter. Do not assume there will always be time to fix things, to explain yourself, to understand each other, because life does not guarantee those moments. And here is another bitter truth, one that may be hard to accept. Most people live their entire lives without ever being truly known. They play roles. They fulfill responsibilities. They meet expectations. But deep inside, there is a part of them that remains unseen, unheard, unexpressed. And that part, it doesn't disappear. It stays with them, quietly, until the end. I was one of those people, for many years. And if I could go back, I wouldn't change the circumstances of my life. I wouldn't change the struggles or the path I took, but I would change how I showed up. I would speak more honestly. I would ask deeper questions. I would risk discomfort for the sake of real connection, because in the end, that is what gives life its depth. Not perfection, not success, but honesty. So let me ask you something, and I don't want you to answer this quickly. I want you to really think about it. Is there something you've been holding back? Something you haven't said because it feels uncomfortable or difficult or risky? Is there a conversation you've been avoiding? If there is, I want you to understand something. That conversation, it doesn't become easier with time. It becomes heavier, and one day, it may become impossible. So don't wait. Say what you need to say. Ask what you need to ask. Open the door before it closes on its own. Because the regret of silence is far greater than the discomfort of honesty. I learned that lesson sitting beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of someone I had known for decades, yet had only just begun to truly understand. And now, at 101 years old, I carry that lesson with me, like a quiet reminder of what matters most. If you are still here, still listening, then I know something about you. You are not just passing time. You are searching for something deeper, something real. And that gives me hope, because the next lesson, the one I will share with you, it is perhaps the hardest of all. It is not about time, not about others. It is about you and the life you are choosing without even realizing it. There is one final regret, the deepest one I carry. And this one has nothing to do with my parents, nothing to do with my husband, nothing to do with anyone else. This one is about me. You can lose people. You can miss moments. You can carry silence in your relationships. But there is something even more painful than all of that. It is the realization that you did not fully live your own life. I did everything I was supposed to do. I was a good daughter, a responsible wife, a caring mother. I followed the path that was expected of me, step by step, without questioning it too much, because that is what we were taught. Be practical, be sensible, don't take unnecessary risks. And on the surface, it worked. I built a stable life, a respectable life, a life that others could look at and say, she did well. But deep inside, there was a quiet voice I ignored for many, many years. It didn't shout. It didn't demand attention. It just whispered from time to time. What about you? At first, I didn't understand that question, because I believed my life was about me. After all, I was living it, making decisions, fulfilling responsibilities. But there is a difference between living a life and living your life. Let me take you back to something I haven't spoken about until now. When I was a young girl, before I left the village, I had a dream. It wasn't a big, ambitious dream, not the kind that people praise or celebrate. It was simple, quiet, but it meant everything to me. I wanted to become a teacher. I loved learning. I loved stories. I loved the idea of standing in front of a room, sharing knowledge, helping others see the world differently. There was a small school in our village, just one room, wooden benches, a chalkboard that was always covered in dust. And sometimes I would stand outside that school, watching the teacher, listening from a distance, imagining myself in her place. That was my dream. But life had other plans. Or maybe I let life decide for me. When I moved to the city, survival became my focus. Earning money, building stability, creating a secure future. And slowly, that dream faded. Not all at once, not dramatically, just quietly. I told myself, it's not practical. I can't afford it. Maybe later. There's that word again. Later. But later never came. Years passed. Responsibilities grew. And the version of me who once stood outside that little school, she disappeared. Or so I thought. Because the truth is, that part of you never truly disappears. It stays with you. In the background. Quiet. Patient. And sometimes it shows up in unexpected ways. Like when I helped my children with their homework, or when I explained something to a neighbor, or when I found myself enjoying the simple act of teaching, even in small moments. There was always a feeling, a quiet sense of, this is what I was meant to do. But I ignored it again and again, because by then it felt too late. Too late to change. Too late to start over. Too late to choose myself. And that is the lie that traps so many people. The belief that it's too late. Let me tell you something clearly. It is almost never too late to become who you were meant to be. But you will convince yourself that it is. Because staying the same feels safer than changing. I stayed the same. I lived my life fulfilling roles, meeting expectations, doing what needed to be done. And there is nothing wrong with that. Responsibility matters. Family matters. Stability matters. But not at the cost of losing yourself completely. That is the balance I never learned. Years turned into decades. My children grew up. My husband passed away. And I found myself alone. Truly alone for the first time in my life. And in that silence, that voice came back, stronger than ever. What about you? But now I had no excuses, no responsibilities to hide behind, no distractions to keep me busy, just time, endless quiet time. And do you know what I realized? I didn't know who I was without my roles, not as a mother, not as a wife, not as someone needed by others, just me. That realization, it is a heavy one. Because when you spend your entire life taking care of everything and everyone else, you forget to build a relationship with yourself. You forget to ask yourself what you want, what you enjoy, what makes you feel alive. And when the noise of life finally fades, you are left with a question you don't know how to answer. Who am I really? That was my third and deepest regret. Not that I didn't achieve something grand, but that I never fully explored who I could have been. I often wonder, what would have happened if I had pursued that dream? If I had taken the risk? If I had allowed myself to grow in that direction? Maybe I would have failed. Maybe it wouldn't have worked out. But at least I would have known. There is a special kind of pain in not knowing, because your mind keeps going back, again and again, creating possibilities, imagining different versions of your life, and each one feels just out of reach. So here is my final warning to you, and I want you to hear this with your whole heart. Do not abandon yourself while building your life. Do not become so focused on what you should do that you forget what you want to do. Do not silence that quiet voice inside you just because it feels inconvenient or uncertain or difficult, because one day that voice will be all you hear, and it will ask you questions you cannot answer. Now, I am 101 years old. I wake up slowly. I walk carefully. I spend most of my days sitting by this window, watching the world move on without me. And I have had a lot of time to think about my life, my choices, my regrets. And if I could gather everything I have learned, everything I have felt, everything I wish I had understood sooner, it would come down to this. Life is not as long as you think. It feels long when you are young, endless, full of time and possibility, but it is not. It is a series of moments. And those moments, they pass quickly, quietly, without asking for your permission. So, if you are waiting for the right time, for the perfect moment, for everything to fall into place, stop waiting. Call the person you miss. Sit with the people you love. Say the things you've been holding back. And don't forget yourself in the process. Pursue what calls you, even if it scares you, even if it doesn't make sense to others, even if it feels uncertain, because a life lived halfway is a life filled with quiet regret. And I don't want that for you. I want you to reach my age and feel something different, not regret, but peace, the kind of peace that comes from knowing you showed up fully, you loved deeply, you spoke honestly, and you didn't abandon yourself along the way. So before you leave, before this moment becomes just another memory, I want you to do one thing. Close your eyes just for a few seconds and ask yourself a simple question. What am I postponing that truly matters? Don't rush the answer. Let it come to you. And when it does, don't ignore it. Act on it today, because one day you will look back at your life, just like I am doing now. And in that moment, you will not see years. You will see choices. Make sure they are the ones you can live with. This is the only thing I truly regret. And now, it is yours to understand or to ignore. But whatever you choose, time will continue moving forward, as it always does. The only question is, will you move with it? Or will you realize too late that you let your life pass you by? Thank you for listening to me. Truly, if these words touched you even a little, don't keep them to yourself. Share them with someone who needs to hear this, because sometimes a single message can change the direction of a life. And if you're willing, stay a little longer on this journey. There are more stories, more truths, more lessons waiting for you. But for now, take a breath, look at your life, and choose wisely.